Welcome to the USS Pentagonal Channel. Britain continues to lead the way in Europe's efforts to increase support for Ukraine. Great news for Ukraine from the UK. Starmer's latest contribution underscores Britain's long-standing commitment to Ukraine. Since the eve of Russia's full-scale invasion more than 3 years ago, the UK has been at the forefront of efforts to build Ukraine's resilience and counter Russian aggression. With the future of U.S. assistance to Ukraine now in question as the Trump administration distances itself from Europe, the UK continues to lead the way as the continent adapts to new security realities and seeks to prevent a Russian victory in Ukraine. Since the start of Russia's invasion in early 2022, the UK has been among Ukraine's biggest supporters. By the end of 2024, British military aid totaled $10.4 billion, placing the country in third place among Ukraine's international partners, behind the United States and Germany. Significantly, the UK has also often led by example in providing Ukraine with new categories of weapons, including modern battle tanks and cruise missiles, paving the way for others to do the same. In addition to direct military assistance, UK support to Ukraine includes cooperation in areas such as cybersecurity, intelligence, and countering hybrid threats. The UK continues to help reform Ukraine's defense sector, while also providing training to Ukrainian military personnel. According to the latest information, the UK has ordered Ukraine to produce 5,000 missiles. With this latest move, the UK's support for Ukraine continues to increase. The UK government and the Irish company Thales have signed an agreement to produce more than 5,000 anti-tank guided missiles for Ukraine. Britain is sending 5,000 extra Martlet missiles to Ukraine. Ukraine is constantly attacked by Russian drones and cruise missiles. They come from many directions and target all kinds of targets throughout Ukrainian territory. Ukraine needs as many mobile air defense vehicles as it can get. That is why the batch of 5,000 LMM anti-aircraft missiles with Rapid Ranger launchers in the new British aid package for Ukraine will be a great contribution. The LMM or Martlet missile is a very interesting weapon that can be used in different modes. It is very light and can be used as an air-to-surface, air-to-air, surface-to-air, and even surface-to-surface weapon. Normally, Martlet missiles are launched by helicopters or drones, but there are other versions. Shortly after the Russian invasion in 2022, Ukraine received an unpublicized number of Martlet missiles used with shoulder launchers and Alvis Stormer armored air defense vehicles. The light multipurpose missile was developed from the Starburst surface-to-air missile and is a completely new weapon. It entered service in 2021 and soon reached Ukraine. Ukrainian defenders are extremely satisfied with the performance of the LMM, using these missiles to engage Russian helicopters and drones. One reason why Ukraine was able to get a large number of Martlet missiles so quickly is that they are interchangeable with the older Starburst missiles, and the same old launchers can be used. Because the missile and the launch mechanism are so light, they can be easily integrated into any all-terrain vehicle. An LMM missile weighs only 13 kilo, is 1.3 meters long, and 76 millimeters in diameter. It has a combination of laser guidance and IR homing for extra precision. Laser guidance makes the LMM very immune to electronic warfare systems and flares, but not good with smokescreens. The operational range is highly dependent on the way it is launched, but is up to 8 km. In Ukraine, Martlet missiles are hunting Russian Geran-2 UAVs and cruise missiles. At the beginning of the occupation, they were also used against manned aircraft. But Martlet can also be used against ground targets. It may not be powerful enough to disable an armored vehicle, but the high-explosive fragmentation warhead with proximity detonator can shatter one of the light vehicles that the Russians often use to attack positions of Ukrainian defenders. Interestingly, while 5,000 additional LMM missiles would be a big boost for Ukraine, it would also help the UK's own defense industry. The Thales factory in Belfast will employ 200 workers. Of course, they will work not only to support Ukraine's defense efforts, but also to fill British orders of their own. Of course, Britain's support for Ukraine is much more than a mere projection of power. There are reports that the UK has frozen Russian assets worth $32 billion. It seems that the UK Treasury has also announced new sanctions against Russia. The UK government has frozen more than $25 billion or $32 billion in Russian assets since Russia launched its full-scale war against Ukraine 3 years ago. The latest figures from the British Treasury show this. The British government said the freezing of Russia's $25 billion worth of assets in the UK was part of the toughest sanctions Russia has ever faced. Working with our allies, we have saved Russia more than $400 billion. the equivalent of 4 years of Russian military spending, said Emma Reynolds, a spokeswoman for the UK Treasury. She assured that the UK will continue to resolutely impose financial sanctions as part of a wider response to Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. It is worth recalling that the UK has previously supported the seizure of frozen Russian assets and their use in support of Ukraine. It is participating in the mechanism to provide Ukraine with a $50 billion loan using Russian assets, within the framework of funds to be repaid by taxing excess profits from Russia's frozen assets. At this point, the ties between London and Kyiv are poised to grow even stronger. The precise nature and objectives of a potential international peacekeeping force for Ukraine are not yet clear. But if current plans proceed as envisaged, it seems almost certain that British troops will feature prominently in any deployment. This would deepen a bilateral relationship that looks set to be at the center of Europe's new security architecture for years to come. As Europe adapts to the dramatic shifts in United States foreign policy initiated by the Trump administration, Britain is playing an important role as a transatlantic intermediary, while also leading European efforts to strengthen Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression. Almost a decade after the country voted to leave the European Union, Britain is once again proving itself indispensable for European security. To this end, Britain wants the coalition of willing nations to provide aircraft to monitor the border with Russia, as well as aircraft capable of shooting down missiles fired into Ukrainian airspace. This is necessary to ensure compliance with any future peace agreement. So we can say that Britain is ready to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukraine. UK Energy Secretary Ed Miliband said that the security of Ukraine's airspace for its allies has always been a key objective. Miliband also said, work continues on the terms of the ceasefire and the protection that will be put in place to maintain the ceasefire and protect the people of Ukraine. This operational planning, this military planning is ongoing. In particular, Miliband underlined that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not given up on the idea of deploying British ground troops in Ukraine as part of a future peace deal. It will be recalled that on March 20th, Starmer met with planners from 30 allied countries at Northwood Military Headquarters in northwest London to agree on proposals for a so-called coalition of those willing to help broker any peace deal. The military planners discussed where the planes would be refueled, where they would be based, how they would be incorporated into the wider military effort in Eastern Europe, and who would provide engineering support. The talks in London focused on how to keep Ukraine's skies, seas, and borders secure, Starmer said after the meeting. Starmer has yet to publicly commit to sending ground troops to Ukraine, leading to speculation that he has changed the focus of the mission. It remains unclear what steps the coalition can take without the direct support of U.S. President Donald Trump. Starmer suggested that the plan might only be feasible with so-called American support in the form of air support and intelligence. Despite repeated requests from the UK and other European leaders, Trump has not yet indicated his readiness to make such a commitment. However, further support for Ukraine was discussed at the European Union summit. The leaders of the 27 European Union countries are discussing further support for Ukraine in Brussels, as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to press Ukraine against the Russian invasion. According to reports, the agenda of the summit, which started on Thursday, March 20th, also includes efforts to increase the competitiveness of the European economy, the issue of Israel's resumption of military operations in the Gaza Strip, the European Union's next long-term budget, and the European Union's defense capability in light of declining support from the United States. Kaja Kallas, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, expressed hope that the summit could reach an agreement on the purchase of 2 million artillery pieces for Ukraine. A few days ago at the European Council meeting, there was not enough support for military aid to Kiev in the amount of 40 billion euros. According to reports, EU countries are also planning to revise the definition of military spending. For the time being, this category includes only procured military equipment, but excludes the cost of training, recruiting, and paying the salaries of new tank crews, pilots, and military technicians. The European Union plans to expand the category of military spending to include most things that are defense-related, but can also be used for civilian purposes. For example, the reinforcement of roads and bridges to guarantee the passage of tanks, the production of drones, helicopters, satellites, radars, and underground bunkers. Among the guests at the summit was United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. On March 20th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is visiting Norway, also joined the talks via video link. The European Union summit that has just started is likely to be German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's last. Following the snap general elections in Berlin in February, coalition talks are underway between the winning conservative blocs, the Christian Democratic Union and the Christian Social Union, and the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Conservative leader Friedrich Merz is expected to become the new federal chancellor. On the other hand, experts believe that Europe can end the war in Ukraine with a single decision. The European Union should lay the foundations for the formation of a new system, using its ability to rearm in a short time and create a new European security system, which, in the future, could develop into a global security system. This view was voiced by Yuri Kostenko, a People's Deputy of Ukraine's five-member parliament, chairman of the Ukrainian People's Party, former Minister of Environment and Natural Environment of Ukraine. I think, on the contrary, if the European Union finally bases its strategy on the fact that the main threat to the security of the European Union is Russia, the Russian Federation will lose, first of all, in the sale of energy resources to the countries of the European Union. You know that despite the war, the main consumers of Russian energy resources are not only China and India, but also the European Union. If we take gas supplies in particular, France, Belgium, and Spain switched to liquefied gas from Russia and increased their purchases of this gas by 36%, the expert emphasized. According to Kostenko, this means that Russia is supporting the same war against Ukraine and the European Union. The expert believes that part of this is threats and acts of sabotage in the Baltic Sea and other regions, terrorism in European countries. If the European Union cuts all economic ties with Russia, it will deal a heavy blow to the Russian public purse, and then its ability to wage war against both Ukraine and the European Union will be undermined. I emphasize again that the European world must finally, first of all, look at the situation with different eyes, analyze it, and no longer discuss it in the stands, but make a decision behind closed doors, in other configurations between states or relevant departments, the military. And as the experts say, at least on the European continent, we should move towards a different security system. According to Kostenko, this means not only the possibility of ending the war in Ukraine and a just peace in accordance with international law, but also the possibility of quickly neutralizing the Russian threat on the territory of the European Union and the European continent. According to the former minister, instead of increasing its political price, Russia will start to disappear and create new types of threats. According to Kostenko, Trump's meeting with Putin, both before and now, shows that at this stage of its geopolitical policy, the United States is not ready to perceive Russia as the main threat to the security of Europe and the whole world. Unfortunately, this is true. But the world does not revolve around the United States. There are options, and above all, these options are in our hands, here in Europe, the expert summarized. On the other hand, Macron is proposing an alternative to European troops in Ukraine. The French president is considering various scenarios. French President Emmanuel Macron is considering setting up a United Nations-led mission to prevent Russia from launching a new attack on Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement. According to reports, this is seen as an alternative to the entry of European troops into the country. Macron is exploring various scenarios that could replace sending European troops to Ukraine. The plan is being developed in cooperation with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. In particular, the French president is considering the possibility of creating a United Nations-led peacekeeping mission aimed at safeguarding future peace agreements. Macron and Starmer are pushing for a coalition of volunteers between North Atlantic Treaty Organization and European Union countries to create a peacekeeping force backed by security guarantees from the United States. Macron also reportedly raised the issue of sending a possible peacekeeping mission to the United Nations at the European Council Summit and discussed the issue with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. In summary, if we look at the war between Russia and Ukraine, which has completed its third year, it would not be wrong to say that Putin has stumbled in the Ukrainian geography. The fact that the war, which the whole world does not think will end, has not been clarified at the time of peace talks shows that the process will be prolonged. In this direction, Trump's advisor expressed the problem holding up the Ukraine-Russia peace agreement. The chief negotiator for the United States in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine said the chances of a peace deal have stalled as the fate of Moscow's seized territories, including Crimea, remains a major point of contention for both sides. Russian and Ukrainian officials have met in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in recent weeks to discuss the outlines of a peace deal and call for an end to hostilities. Russian President Vladimir Putin reportedly agreed to a limited ceasefire, excluding infrastructure targets, in a phone call with President Donald Trump earlier this week. In a statement, the White House described the call as the first step in a movement toward peace that will hopefully include a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea and a full and lasting end to the war that Russia launched in February 2022. In an interview, Steve Witkoff, special representative of the United States of America, Russia, referred to some details of the Ukraine talks and praised the great progress made with Russia, emphasizing that nobody thought it was possible. However, he acknowledged that talks have now stalled on the territories seized by Russia: Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Russia took control of Donetsk and Luhansk at the beginning of the 2022 occupation and then took control of Zaporizhia and Kherson. All this after invading Crimea in 2014 and holding it to this day. Kiev refused to move forward without an agreement that Russia would leave the territory. Witkoff defended Russia's claim to these territories by referring to the disputed referendums Russia has forced in the contested regions. Ukraine and its Western allies condemned these referendums, held in 2022, as illegitimate. Witkoff claimed that the regions are Russian-speaking territories, and the overwhelming majority of the population wants to be under Russian rule. According to reports, Witkoff referred to this issue as the elephant in the room. Once this is resolved, we are having a very, very positive conversation, Witkoff said, adding that Russia has de facto control over the territories. Then President Joe Biden called the referendums held after Russia annexed and occupied the territories under the pretext of occupying all of Ukraine a fraud. Last week, Zelensky claimed that his country did not recognize the occupied territories as Russian, a statement he made after the issue was raised during talks between the warring countries and Saudi Arabia. The Trump administration has argued that Ukraine would have to make concessions, including territorial ones, if the authorities wanted to end the conflict sooner. But after talks between Trump and the leaders of the United Kingdom and France, Trump said the United States would help Ukraine get as much back as possible. Trump later had a high-level discussion in the Oval Office with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said Ukraine has no cards and should take a more realistic stance in peace talks. Witkoff told Carlson that Ukraine has a constitutional problem in terms of what they can accept in terms of giving up territory. Witkoff remains very, very optimistic that we can bring the two sides together. The United States and its Saudi partners will continue to seek a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. The United States is expected to hold separate talks with both delegations in Saudi Arabia. So, what do you think about this issue? We would be glad if you specify in the comments. Thank you for watching us.